I'm located here in Toronto, and I've worked with Chandra and Slavko over the last 8 or 9 months, attending the local Oracle users group, and I thought it was a really good idea for Kumaran to invest time and money into sponsoring this particular event, just because of the the knowledge base that we have here in Toronto and the GTA. It would be good. We thought it would be a good venue for us to basically publicize ourselves and talk in more detail about what Kumaran is and what we do. So I'll be spending about 5 minutes or less talking a little bit about Kumaran. And joining me today is Mr. Michael Ferrante. Michael comes to us from Florida, and Michael Ferrante is a principal product manager for Oracle Forms, has a legacy relationship with Oracle and Oracle Forms, has been associated. I'll let him talk about himself, but basically he's got over a decade or more, possibly 2 decades, and he'll clarify that, with Oracle Forms. So if any of you in the audience have any experience whatsoever, have ever touched Oracle Forms, Michael's here to talk to you about it today, and he's the right person to ask questions. So with that, I'll also introduce my manager, Athelston, who's Manager of Strategic Accounts, and Srinivas Anand, who's one of our VPs, who flew all the way from Chennai, India, to attend my presentation. So thank you, everybody. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with Kumaran in terms of an organization or a company, but we've actually been in business for over 25 years. Our head office is located in Chennai, India. But we do have offices here in Toronto, and I'm the Senior Business Development Manager responsible for all the accounts for Kumaran. We started off as a product-focused company and then essentially evolved from a product-based company to a services/consulting firm. So there are a number of different areas in which we have expertise in, but more specifically for the benefit of the audience today, we grew up with Oracle Forms. The original product that we had was an Oracle Forms product, and essentially today we still promote migrations, Oracle migrations, to any company or customer that's looking to potentially move from one platform to the next, whether it be Oracle, Ingress, Power Builder, what have you. So that's really where our expertise lies, and we've got, I'm going to say, hundreds of years of experience with respect to the people that are at Kumaran and the knowledge that they've got combined. To date, we have over 2,000 implementations, and that's across the board. It's not just the Oracle-based products, but it's across the board for some of the other pillars. We are CMMI certified, level 3, and moving towards level 5. And essentially, as a company, we're growing. We see there's a need in the marketplace for these types of solutions. There's a gap in terms of expertise with respect to organizations looking for this type of help. And basically, we're here to assist you with those particular services. So one other thing I'd like to also mention to you before I let you go is that for those individuals in the audience today, we will also be attending Oracle World. We will have a booth at the Moscone Center in Oracle World, so if any individuals in the audience have plans on attending the event, feel free to drop by our booth. Just come onto our website at www.kumaran.com, and you'll have all the information here. So thanks very much for your time. I'll hand it over to Michael.
Thank you. I will first say that was my thank you slide to the Kumaran team for inviting me out here. It's always a great opportunity to come out and share my time with everybody and kind of get the word out on the status of Forms and what we've got going on out at Oracle. We have some really great partners out there. Kumaran, we've got Martin here from Pitts, and there's many of them. So there's plenty of organizations out there that can help you with whatever projects you're working on, whether it's upgrading from old version to new version or enhancing your application or whatever it is. You shouldn't feel stuck with whatever you have. There's always room for improvement, and there's always people there to help. In the event that you choose not to go out to a, I'll call it a third party for lack of better terms, there's always the Oracle team there to help. We've got a great support team. We try to do our best at keeping our websites up to date, at least in the form space. I monitor the the OTN forums daily, if not multiple times daily. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, whatever, you can always get in touch with me one way or another. If not the forums, email or phone, whatever, don't hesitate to contact me. I don't mind. I would rather you get answers to your questions than be left without answers. I'm sure most of you have seen this statement before. It's Oracle's standard safe harbor statement. I will tell you that I'm going to be throwing some dates around, and I'm going to be talking about new features. And it's important that everybody understand that this is just sort of a general discussion. There's nothing here that I could guarantee. All of our products are always under development, so what we end up with when they go into production is usually unknown until the day it rolls out. So please don't hold me to anything I offer you here. This is just to kind of give you an idea of where we are. If anyone can't hear me, please yell at me or something, because my mouth has been going all day long and I'm about at the end. So let me give you an idea of what we're going to talk about here. And I know my hand is going to get annoying. I think I'm going to switch sides so I don't keep doing that. What I want to do is I want to take a look at forms in the context of its past and its present. This is a common slide. I use this slide all the time just because I want where we are, that there's actually value in that. And then I'm going to talk about upgrading. And when I talk about upgrading, generally I'm after you guys that are running the very oldest of versions and looking to come forward. I want to make sure that you understand the value in coming forward. A lot of times I'm asked, what's the point of upgrading? We're going to talk about that. Then after we talk about upgrading, I'm going to do something I'm really not supposed to do. We're going to talk about new features. The next version of Forms has been previously delayed, and consequently it's been a long time since we had a new release. Contact information, you've probably seen this on everybody's slides, but a little bit different for us because on the Forms side of the world, things are a little bit different now that I'm responsible for Forms. I'll explain why when we get to that point. And then, of course, last but not least, we'll have a little bit of question and answers. But even beyond that, if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns as we're going through these, interrupt me. I want you to interrupt me while the information is fresh, and that way we could address whatever your question or concern is in real time. Okay? Questions or concerns? All right, let's go for it. Okay. Full steam ahead, as they say. So this graphic, which has been around probably longer than I've been around, is a great representation of where the product came from and where it is, and who knows where it's going. So back in about 1982, in some magical world of Oracle, they created Oracle Forms, which at that time it wasn't called Oracle Forms, but we won't go into those details. Character mode, block mode, kind of similar. Sometime in the 80s or so, when Microsoft managed to get Windows out on the streets, client server was born. And not too far in the recent past, we managed to get out onto the internet and web-base the product. This last little part of the image I've seen substituted for a variety of different technologies. Personally, I prefer to leave it blank because we don't really know what's going in there just yet. But if anybody is interested in what the official statement is, statement of direction, it is on that website. It's actually on the OTN product page or Forms product page. It's dated 2012. I've been asked countless times, why isn't it dated 2014? The reason it's not dated 2014 is because the information is exactly the same today as it was in 2012, so there's no reason to change the document. In it, it basically says that we are planning a version 12 of Forms. It also says we're planning a version 12 of Reports. It also goes on to say that Designer reached its end of life in version 10. Okay. There's additional information there as well. I encourage you to go take a look at it. So this is the information most people have been dying to see. So I'm going to start from the left and work my way to the right, which I know you're more interested in information on the right. So back in about 2005 or so, we released version 10. And it was supported through, just about a couple of years ago. Lost my train of thought there. As you can see, there was an overlap when we released release 1 of 11. And then roughly about the same time span that version 10 lived, excuse me, we released version 11 release 2. As the graphic implies there, Version 12 is anticipated in calendar year 2015. Because there's not really a great way to depict it, it shows here as somewhere in mid-2015, which is not necessarily accurate. We could be earlier than that, we could be later than that, but the key here is that version 12 is anticipated sometime in calendar year 2015. Currently still heavily in development, so for those of you that are thinking, oh wow, I really want a beta version of it, I assure you, you don't want a beta version of it just yet, because it's still grossly in development. We still have version 11 labels on it, so I mean, it's not version 12 yet. We've got a long way to go. We've got a lot of good work going on. Okay. This is a good one. Questions or comments here about the plan? One thing you should realize, or as you take a quick glance at this, even though this isn't perfectly to scale, is that the time frames of each of the products are basically the same. So each major version that comes out gets 5 years of Premier support with 3 years of optional extended support. And again, you can see each of the 3 versions roughly is about the same. That's true of all of them. You could probably anticipate version 12 will look exactly like that. So if you're wondering, well, how long do I have with version 12 of Forms? If we do the math, 2015 plus 5 years of Premier is 2020, plus 3 years of extended support takes you into 2023. My hope is that long before 2023, we roll out whatever next version would overlap yet again. So that takes you into 2023 at bare minimum. Good, I don't see smiles. I was hoping for smiles on that one. Okay. This is a more detailed view of that information minus version 12. This is an actual screenshot from the lifetime support policy, which is available to everybody. As you can see, version 11 release 1 has already expired as far as Premier support is concerned, so that is something you should consider if you're running that version or older. So that's 11.1.1 or older. If you're not concerned about support, that's entirely up to you. For a whole bunch of reasons, that's probably not a good idea, but those are the real dates as they stand today. For anybody running version 6, I did include the note number down here on the bottom that has the de-support notice of it. You'll laugh if you saw the dates on it. By all means, jot that number down and go take a look. It's been a long time. Okay. So now that you've upgraded, what in the world do I do with it? What do I get? What's the point? Well, there's a lot of reasons. These are just a few bullets that actually I came up with off the top of my head, right? So we've got things like Windows 8.1 out there, Windows 2012 Release 2, Oracle's going to release Oracle Enterprise Linux 7 soon if we haven't done it already. So lots of new platforms out there. You want to get software on those platforms. Please don't tell me you want to put Form 6 on Windows 2012. That's just not a good idea. I don't even know if it'll work. Getting onto the latest version gives you the ability to pick up those current operating systems, both on the client and the server side. Oops. New features. Seems obvious, but with each new version we roll out new features. We take old features and we enhance them. In some case we do a little bit of a mixture of both. We take an old feature, enhance it, maybe add some functionality to it. So definitely moving to a newer version is worthwhile if you're interested in adding some new behavior to your application, which I encourage. We'll talk about that in a minute too. Performance and scalability improvements. Although sometimes people question it, there are actually extensive efforts put into performance and scalability as we release new versions. The problem I think we see most often is that you will try to get in a platform that was running your old version quite well and install a new version on it. For example, trying to take version 12 of Forms when it comes out and putting it on your Windows 2003 dual CPU machine is probably not going to be a good idea because it's not going to perform anything like your old version 6 did on that machine. So we need to kind of compare apples to apples. When version 12 comes out, you need to make sure that you're complying with the minimum requirements of that product version, in which case you will find better performance and scalability, hopefully. Okay. Easier and improved integration. For anyone that's looked closely, especially with version 11, we did more of this as we went into 11. With each new version, we try to add some additional integration point or improved integration point. As an example, with version 11, we We included an ability to integrate with client-side JavaScript. So now from a forms application running on the client, you could send JavaScript out to the surrounding HTML page, and vice versa. You could send information back into the forms application, which is really cool when you consider the idea of taking maybe an Apex application or an ADF application and having your forms application communicate with it or share information. Maybe you enter a value into a field on your ADF application, and that data needs to also go into the forms application to do some other processing. You could easily have that information instantly passed over to the form, or vice versa the other way around. Alternatively, you could execute just a generic HTML command or JavaScript command. Maybe you want to minimize a browser or do anything else that you could do with JavaScript. You can now do that from within forms. That's just one example of integration. Right? There's several of them. Compatibility with newer Oracle products. Same concept as all the other ones I've mentioned. Please don't try to tell me you're trying to get your version 6 of Forms to connect to database version 12. Probably will work. You're going to have problems with it eventually, though. It's not a good plan. So if you want to pick up newer database versions, you're going to have to pick up new Forms versions, right? Security. I know everyone's talking about security these days. With every release that we do, just like looking at performance, we look closely at security. We take what we've learned from previous versions, we take what we've learned from critical patch updates, media information, whatever information we come up with, we try to make sure we think about that carefully as we go into the next release. Generally speaking, and I will tell you that for version 12 even more so, we are looking at the ability to give our customers the ability to take a little bit more of their own control over various security features. I won't go into the details just yet, but we are going to try to give control back to you guys, the developers, administrators, whatever the case is. So that'll be kind of a neat set of features we're looking at there. Making upgrading to the next release or next version easier. I think I've mentioned it to some of you already. If you're on, just as an example, version 6, and we roll out version 12 tomorrow, and you say to me, hey Mike, what's involved in me getting from version 6 to version 12? I'm going to start by shaking my head, and I'm going to say you've got a little bit of work ahead of you. It can be done. It's not really difficult. It's not any more difficult than it ever was in the past. But the difference is you didn't incrementally upgrade with us. So normally where a customer would have went from 6 to 9 to 9 to 10 to 11 and so on and so forth, you might have to make those stops along the way in order to get to 12. And you also are going to have to deal with, for example, let's say we obsoleted some piece of functionality. Somewhere along the line you might have to change your code to do that because you're now 15 years behind the current version and now trying to get current. So kind of keep that in mind as you make your plan to upgrade. That type of scenario is great for our partners, Kumaran, Pitts, and whoever they may be. You know, they've got a lot of experience in dealing with that stuff. But definitely things to think about as you make your plan to upgrade. That said, upgrading in general is generally easy from the forms point of view. Recompile, your application is now the new version. You're done. And that has no plan to change. When we roll out 12, the same expectation will be there. If I take my version 11 form, I regenerate it in version 12, I now magically have a version 12 form. It'll run like a champ. I'm trying to keep it easy. Okay? And of course, there's the idea of support. Obviously, we don't support version 6 anymore. And based on that slide I had up just a while ago, you can see we hardly even support version 11 anymore, release 1. So if you do have a need for support, and when I say support, I don't necessarily mean getting on the phone and asking for help. I'm talking about patches and documentation and even access to old software. As the product becomes older and older, access to that stuff tends to become more and more difficult, and the support team may not even be able to help you. I could tell you, I know of nearly every nook and cranny in Oracle, and I usually could find every document and piece of software we have, but I guarantee you, if you ask me for a document that was for version 4.5.7, I probably won't be able to find it because it's long since been removed. Okay, so just think about that carefully as well. Comments, questions before I go too far?
Yeah, is that rule applicable also for the client using EBS release 11, for instance?
None of this information completely differently. For a variety of reasons, mostly because that customer or user base is much larger and generally have many more restrictions on upgrading or not. So we're a little bit more liberal. The dates are usually extended a little further and and so on and so forth. Now, having said that, the comment I just made about things like documentation and gaining access to old software, it's still very difficult. If you're running version 11.0 of apps, or even 11i, the older versions of 11i, picking up maybe older patches or older documentation is going to become more and more difficult as time goes on if there is a newer version that has replaced it. So you want to be really careful with that. If you have the ability to come forward with us, it's probably a good idea to do it whenever it's possible. I realize it's not as simple as I'm making it. Okay. So somewhere along the line I was asked about what features we have and what do I gain. I'm not going to go through these verbatim, but I just want you guys to see the list. These are kind of the highlighted features of each of the versions, starting with version 10. There were many more than this, but generally speaking, these were the key features that were highlighted when the version rolled out. You can see on version 10 when we rolled it out, there really weren't many changes. Let's just say version 10 was a stabilization version. And I believe it was. My personal opinion is 10.1.2.3, the very last version, is pretty darn stable compared to others. So it was a pretty good version. Not a lot of new features, it was kind of a happy camper. Important note there is the last bullet though. In version 10 we added the ability to convert to XML files, which to some tends to be very valuable, especially when we're talking about things like source control. The XML files tend to go very well in source control compared to say the binary. There's a little bit more flexibility there to do that, and a lot more third-party tools can work with that. So that was a good one that we added. So here comes release 1 of 11. You can see the list of new features got a little bit longer. Again, the key features. Again, I'm not going to go through each of them individually, but you can see like we added the JavaScript integration and server-side events. What that's talking about is the ability to access the advanced queuing in the database, which is actually a really neat feature. We could talk about that offline if you want, but that's a good one. Then release 2 came out. Release 2 was actually the result of customer requests, which I thought was kind of neat. I don't recall us having done that very often, but we had a lot of customer requests for Oracle Access Manager, as well as some other features, but the key one was Oracle Access Manager. The second feature that we had requested was this concept of a developer type install, which provided a little bit lighter weight installation for developers to use like on a laptop or a smaller scale machine. So as a result of that, we made a decision to take some of the other features that were already in work at the time. We added those to version 11 release 2 along with what was requested, and we ended up with this moderately long list by comparison to the other ones. So back to what I first said, what do I get when I upgrade? Well, if you're on version 10 or older, consider that what you're going to get is a combination of all three of these. So if you're on version 9 or 902 or 6 or anything older than that, you're going to gain all of the features combined coming forward. But more importantly, you're going to gain all that other stuff I talked about a minute ago, platform compatibility, Oracle compatibility, easier to upgrade to 12 when it comes out, and so on and so forth. This is the pretty one, 12. If you'll notice, the version is X's. I was actually asked by my legal team to take the version out of there. When I first presented this slide about a year ago, I had version 12.x in there, and they asked me to take it out because we don't even know if it's going to come out as version 12. As those of you know, think about how the number scheme went. We went from version 6 to version 9 of forms. What happened to 7 and 8? So they asked me to take the numbers out, so I did. But it's probably going to be 12. 12 something.
So are you giving these the version numbers in concurrent with the Oracle database releases or not, or totally independent?
These numbers have absolutely nothing to do with the database. It's just coincidental that we have a version 12 database.
In some cases, it coincides with the Oracle.
If it coincides with the database, it's just a coincidence. Yeah, there's no relationship at all. In fact, just to give you an example, and I don't want to get too sidetracked on technical information, but each forms version is built on top of a database client version. In the case of 12, and I'm just making an example, we might build against, I don't know, 11.2 of the database, but we're still going to call it version 12. That's just an example. I don't know what we're going to build against. We haven't made that decision yet. Okay. So again, I admittedly will say this is a reuse slide from last year. But I kept it because I think it shares some information that should be considered as I try to encourage everybody to take advantage of new features. I've been saying it for since we all showed up here a little while ago, because it's really important to me. The idea of upgrading just for the sake of getting a new version number, to me, seems pointless. Why go through all the exercise if your only purpose is I want to change version 10 to version 11? If you're not going to take advantage of the new features, if you're not solving a problem, and you don't need support, why are you upgrading, I would ask. I would suggest, at bare minimum, that you take a look at the documentation, the deployment guide for forms. Chapter 2, specifically, talks about the new features, at least at a high level. And think about for a minute what your application does. If in any way you could leverage the new features that have been put into the document, into the product, I encourage you to at least prototype something. See if you could take advantage of this new feature to make your application better, because I mean, there's no better way to say it than if your if your end users are happy and comfortable using the tools that you've delivered to them, they're going to work more efficiently and more effectively. And I guarantee you, if you collected all your end users up in this room right now and said, how many of you love the forms application we have? I guarantee you're going to get a large number of them that say, oh, I wish we would have this feature, and this other feature. The neat thing about some of the stuff we've added in 11 is putting the features that a lot of end users want into those applications is going to be easier. This is a good example. This slide is going to show a couple of good examples. So what we have here is on the left is a screenshot of the old Summit demo. Doesn't matter if you're familiar with it or not, it's a forms application. What this is trying to depict is an idea where if you have a forms application that could take advantage of an ability to present some other technology, in this case a Google map, wouldn't it be cool to have your application do that? Wouldn't it be cooler if you could do it simply, maybe with just a line or two of code underneath a button or a mouse click trigger or whatever it happens to be? That's what we're trying to illustrate here. Take advantage of other technologies that do jobs better than we do. If ADF is able to solve a problem better than forms could do it, it doesn't mean throw away your forms application and rewrite everything in ADF. What it means is write the task or solve the problem that you're trying to solve in ADF and then integrate the two pieces together. Version 11's ability to use JavaScripting and client-side Java both make integrating with ADF or Apex or your homegrown HTML page relatively easy. So there's no reason to throw one away and start from scratch. Take advantage of your ability to have these things talk together. We've got a demo on OTN, which you could download. It's a little outdated. It probably needs to be updated, but it does something like this picture suggests. On the left-hand side is a standard employee demo block form. On the right-hand side is a calendar. That calendar is 100% JavaScript on the client side. So wouldn't it be neat to have a date picker in JavaScript where you could do, and you can't really see it here, but the background on that calendar has sort of a brushed steel look to it. So it's got kind of a modern kind of color pattern to it, which you can't really do easily in forms. So from a date field in a form, let's say for example you double click on it, you could pop open a JavaScript calendar, choose whatever date you want, and have the value you chose on the JavaScript calendar plug back into the form, which is exactly what you'd want a date picker to do. The difference is your calendar runs much lighter weight because it's running on the client as JavaScript, and you get it to look pretty. Okay? All right, so we're talking about integration. So visual integration is another option, right? We talked about having an ADF page, an Apex page, an HTML page, pick your page of choice. Why not take advantage of the ability to plug a form into one of those pages? This is a really blurry image. There's that same Summit form plugged into a page. I don't even know what that is. That could be a portal page. It doesn't really matter what the page is. Plug the applet into the page. Remember, version 11, there's that JavaScript thing again. It would be very easy to have fields or data, buttons, whatever, in the HTML part of the page communicate with the form itself and vice versa. And because they're visually integrated, doing those types of exchanges become relatively transparent. In this example, not so transparent because the form looks kind of ugly, to be quite honest with you. In version 11 release 2, we added a new feature that allows you to do things like strip off part of the windowing of the form. So for example, if you didn't want this brown menu at the top and whatever other parts of the window that you don't like, you could actually remove those and effectively just show the canvas. What you end up with is a form now literally embedded into the HTML page, almost looking like the HTML page. So from the user's point of view, it looks like you just have an HTML page with some extra neat functionality in it. So kind of cool. Not gaining you guys a lot as developers, but from the end user experience point of view, gives them something a little bit more appealing to work with all day long. Okay. And the last couple of ideas with integration, again, we're on the new feature idea, at least for version 11 at the moment. In version 11, we added advanced queuing, or access to advanced queuing, or database events. I'm not going to go into too much detail on it here, but just to give you an idea of what advanced queuing does for you, from an environment where advanced queuing is set up, you have the ability to send messages down to a queue. So imagine, if you will, an instant messaging program, for example, which is actually one of the demos that we created to demonstrate this, this feature, which probably wasn't a great one for forms, but it does show how it works. So you're running an Apex application, and in that Apex application, you send a message down to the database's advanced queue. That message is then pushed out to the forms application. The forms application can then react to it. What was the message? Well, I don't know. Let's say, for example, in the Apex application, we flagged that we took the last item off of the shelf in inventory. And the forms application is on a call center application. Maybe this causes the forms application to pop open a message that says, the last dozen roses have been sold, do not sell any more roses today. Right? So in real time, the end user on the forms side of the application could now be warned of some important information that they may need to know right now. So that's what you get out of that type of functionality. And the last comment there is a reference to web services. I don't know why we have this on here, because that functionality actually has been around, believe it or not, since version 6. However, it fits very well here. I cited an example earlier today, which I hadn't really considered before, but take, for example, a delivery service, Federal Express, United Parcel Service, or anyone around the world, where they offer public-facing web services where, for example, you could check the status of a tracking number. What's the status of my delivery, my package, or whatever. It's relatively easy to incorporate that stuff into a form. So from the form, you plug in a tracking number, you hit a button, it goes out to the UPS web service, finds the status of my package, and pops up that information in your form. You didn't have to really write any code relative to getting the status itself. Somebody else did the writing for you. So that's kind of neat. Okay. Thoughts, comments, questions? Am I completely boring everyone? Right? How many people here are the developers of the application, or did you inherit the application that you currently have? The developer? The developer? I think inheriting the application is probably the most popular, right? Okay. One of the things I wanted to start stressing, or suggesting, I should say, is that a lot of these applications that were inherited over the years likely were written many years ago, probably before I even started working at Oracle. Unfortunately, they were written back in a day, say, in the Windows 3.1 days, or the character mode days, where the main color of all those environments was either gray, black, or white. Yuck. Let's take a look at something. Like that one? Should we go back to that? That's pretty, isn't it? I'd like to look at that about 8 or 9 hours a day. That would make me happy. I'd go home with a headache. Just as an example, this came out of a user manual that we had at Oracle. I stumbled upon this purely on accident. I had to put it in here. You see it was back in 1998 that this screenshot was taken. Old character mode application that we used to track service requests that you guys contacted support with. This application went out right after I started with Oracle, and it was replaced by a client-server flavor of it, thank goodness, because I couldn't look at that all day. That would kill my eyes. So although this is not the same application, it is yet another application, but an example of how you could modernize something so old and boring looking and turn it into something more modern looking. I'm still running forms. I haven't jumped into ADF or somebody else's technology. This is still forms, right? And this doesn't really do it justice. You probably, if you could see it on my slide on the laptop, you'd understand. But carefully picking the color palette that you use in your application may seem trivial, but again, using that example of sitting in front of that for 8 hours a day, I assure you, carefully choosing your colors is going to be important. Because if I have to look at that all day long, it's not going to be a happy day when I go home. Let me show you how this works. So here's that Summit demo again. This is how it was created back in 1992, I believe this demo was created. It's quite old. Purple and green and gray, really? What were we thinking? I don't know. I have to find out who in Oracle developed that, because I would have never done that. The other thing to pay close attention to, remember, I'm talking about this concept of who inherited the application. When this was written in 1992, a typical screen size was what, 800 by 600 if we're lucky? So they wrote this under the idea that, well, I only have this much space, so I can't really put a whole lot of information here. Well, now in 2014, I don't know about all of you, my desktop monitors, I've got a 24-inch and a 28-inch sitting on my desk, so this thing disappears on that machine. Same thing with your end users. Why not give them all the information they need in one place, rather than them having to open 4 different windows and have them scattered all over the place? This application, there we go, with very little effort, can be enhanced. These are trivial enhancements that I did here. This was purely for example's sake only. This is exactly the same application as this. I did not rewrite anything. I started with this, and I just looked at it and said, well, what's the problem here? Well, first of all, there's not enough data here. This is wasted space. The form can be made wider, and so on and so forth. So that's exactly what I did. Made it wider, put more data on it. I'm thinking about, I'm a customer service person. I'm on the phone. The end user says, hey, while I've got you on the phone, I placed an order 2 months ago and I haven't received it yet. What's the story on that? Rather than switching to another screen, now the customer service person could look over here and write and see past orders that this customer placed. There's probably about 3 lines of code to make all of the changes that I did this with. I used the wizard. I used the data block wizard to create the new multi-record block on the right. I didn't write any of the code. The tool did. It took me about 2 seconds to do that. But now I've offered my end user much more flexibility in their application. So now they could work more efficiently. The old way, I had to open up another form. I had forms overlapping, clutter on the screen. It's too noisy. That's not an efficient way to get work done. Let's keep going with this. Colors we were talking about. Once I removed all the hard-coded coloring, purple and green and whatever, and reset to the default or unspecified, I now have the ability to alter the colors of the application outside of the code. So using the color scheme functionality, or applet parameter we offer you, you could change the application colors simply by changing an applet parameter, or something you enter in a URL. The end user wants it blue, they could make it blue. They want to make it green, they could make it green. Rather than having to look at this all day. Maybe I'm colorblind, I don't know. I can't even see this gray background. It looks black to me or something, I don't know. You could easily change that stuff. So this is a very simple change that I think could add great value. As ridiculous as that sounds, I think it adds great value. And I say that coming to you as an end user. I've sat behind applications that look like the one on the left. It's painful, okay? Simple changes add lots of value all the time. Okay? Just small investment, big bang for the buck. Okay? Questions, thoughts, comments? Oh, I'm putting everyone to sleep. It's getting late. Okay. Let's get into some good stuff. So let's look at some new features. Again, these are just kind of prototype features. These are not commitments for version 12. These are just general ideas that we're working on. I will tell you that there's only a few here, and when I'm done, you're going to say, really, that's it? I have a much bigger list planned for open world. As we get closer and closer to the release of 12 and we understand what we're going to do, I will start to share more and more information. So this is going to be kind of a gradual release, so I'm going to kind of encourage you guys to follow me over the next few months and into the next year. Okay? So here are some of the high-level things of what we're looking at for at least future versions. We want to take a look at the pain points in the Forms Builder. Lots of outdated functionality in the Builder, right? Yep. I want to start by looking at the things that will make your job as developers more productive. Do things faster. Things that now take you 5 clicks, I want to turn that into 1 click. Things that take you 10 clicks, I want to turn into 5 clicks. That kind of productivity. I don't want to ask my developers to reinvent the wheel. I don't want to ask them to rebuild the Forms Builder. It's too involved to do that, and it's too risky, and it means you have to go back to training, and we don't want to do that. But I want to make what is there work better. So that's task 1. I mentioned applet parameters, talking about the color scheme. Same kind of concept. I want to offer new applet parameters that allow you to change the look, feel, and basic functionality of the application without changing code. So common stuff that, and off the top of my head I can't think of anything, but whatever it is, maybe centering the application on the screen or maximizing it or whatever it is, I want you to be able to do that from an external applet parameter and not have to start changing PL SQL code to get that kind of functionality, because a lot of that functionality exists in the Java layer. So if we could do that, doing this on the client side becomes easy, and that's what an applet parameter is going to give you. So we have quite a few already lined up. I'm kind of excited about them. We'll see how that plays out, but I think it's a good idea. I think it gives you an opportunity to change some of the behavior in a way that you want and not have to worry about destabilizing your application. I mentioned security features. Like I said, every release we touch on security. We've got some really cool stuff we're looking at on the security side of the house. And I'm not talking about security vulnerabilities that have been fixed, because, well, Forms really doesn't have any. What I'm talking about is the ability to take control of security, whether it's single sign-on, the username or the login dialog, the change password dialog, and several other areas. I want to give you guys control over how those things function, whereas today it's mostly hard-coded stuff. JVM controllers. How many people integrate with reports from Forms? Oh, mercy, really? Nobody? Nobody uses reports? How about imported Java in their Forms application? Does anybody import Java, custom Java on the server side? I see a yes over here. If you're using reports, as in run report object, or imported Java on the server side, what happens is when either of those things get accessed, a JVM is spawned on the server. The cost of doing that becomes quite high when you have 100, 500, 1,000, 10,000 users, concurrent users. New features that we have planned for the JVM controller will allow you to load balance that resource hog that occurs. We're going to add, like I mentioned, load balancing functionality. We're going to add improved diagnostic functionality. We're going to just, in general, modernize the JVM controller. What you see today in version 11 and even in version 10, I argue, is sort of a version 1 of the JVM controller. What we're about to do is what should have been done in the beginning. This is going to be cool stuff that we're getting. Okay. Performance improvements. When we first rolled out Exalogic, my first thought was, how cool will it be to start seeing customers running Forms on an Exalogic machine? Here's this modern, real 21st century piece of hardware, and somebody's running this legacy application on it. I mean, that's headline news to me. Who does that? Because the application likely will run like a rocket on that thing. But what I did was, when we started thinking about it for real, I went back to our developers and I said, is there any way that we could take advantage specifically of a piece of hardware? And they said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, like, for example, Exalogic. I mean, here's this machine that potentially has, and I forget what the number is, but like 128 CPUs and, a huge amount of RAM. Like, why don't we look at what's on this machine and take advantage of that? My developer raised his eyebrow and he said, I bet you I could do something with that. Let me look into that and I'll get back with you. Well, lo and behold, their lovely wisdom, our guys are great. They found a way in which they can actually do that. So if you take, for example, how we deal with the record manager and querying up large amounts of records. If you do a query all against the block and you pull back 1,000,000 records, we create a temp file. What if we put all those records into memory? Kind of like the in-memory option we offer for the version 12 database. And then we use them as necessary and we give them up when we don't need them anymore. your access to those files are going to be, or not files, but records is going to be, countless times faster. You're going to be measuring in microseconds instead of milliseconds. So we're looking at doing that. We've had a lot of success with our testing so far, so I'm really happy about it. I don't know if we're going to see this in version 12. We might. We're pretty close. I don't know yet. But this might potentially be a good one for those of you that have larger servers or access to larger servers or are considering larger servers. We talked about external events. Advanced queuing was one of them. We've got a lot of new system events, we're going to call them, planned for the future. We thought about things like monitoring client idle time. I've been asked a lot, how do I monitor when the client gets up, goes to lunch, leaves their application here, and leaves us vulnerable for someone else to sit down at their machine? How do we terminate that application? Today, the recommended way is you write a Java bean, include it in your application, and you handle it yourself. Yeah, that's kind of clumsy and kind of old school. We're going to do it for you this time. So now you won't have to mess with that. We're going to look at things like single sign out. What happens if I single sign out of an application today? Well, nothing. Your form continues to run, right? Because we don't really do single sign out. We just do single sign on. We're looking at giving you the ability to do something with single sign out. We're going to let you choose what you do. Maybe you want to continue to do nothing. Maybe you want to exit. Maybe you want to go to another web page. Maybe you want to warn the user. It's your choice. You're the developer. You're the expert, not me. I don't know your application. You do. And our hope is that when we pick that up, we're not picking it up just for the sake of picking it up. We're looking at taking advantage of some of the new features that WebStart will offer us when we do that. I better move faster. And new installation options. So we've got a lot of cool stuff coming. Let's go into more detail real quick, and I've got about 3 minutes, and I think I could do it. So again, this is all prototype stuff. It's not committed to anything yet. I'm often asked about documentation. Where do I find documentation? Where do I find the MTN forms? I don't have the link. My bookmarks got deleted. We're going to give you access to all of that stuff directly out of the builder. Today, I think the only thing you have on there is the second to last one, which takes you to the forms product page. We're going to give you access to everything related to forms right out of the builder. OLE, new Java security rules require that all Java jar files be signed if they're going to be run on the client side. Many customers want to use WebUtil, but they don't use the OLE functionality, and they say, well, this is ridiculous that I've got to get a third-party jar file and sign it when I don't even use it. This is going to give you the ability to not use that. So if you're not using OLE, then there's no reason to have Jacob. I agree with you, and we're going to give you a supported way of doing that. Okay. Talked about those system events. I won't go through each one, but if you quickly read through the list, you should get a clue as to which ones we're looking at doing. Hint, hint, look at the last one. Right, cool. I mentioned these 2 dialog boxes. We decided that it was time to offer a way to customize these dialog boxes. However, the ability to do this is somewhat difficult because of the time at which these are presented. Talking about in the flow of how a form runs, and I won't bore everyone with those details either. But because of the way that part of the product works, we found it very difficult to offer very granular customization. But what we were able to do was offer this, the ability to add text to these boxes. The importance of that is if, for example, your database is case sensitive, you could put a message on the login box, the one on the left there, that says something like this: username and password fields are case sensitive. Or maybe on the change password dialog box on the right, you want to offer what rules are required to create the new password. You have to use uppercase, you have to use numbers, letters, whatever you want to do. The key is we're looking at offering this with the ability to do 255 single byte characters. And I explicitly said single byte because if you happen to be using Chinese, Japanese, whatever, somebody has multi-byte, whatever that translates into out of 255 single byte, that's all that's going to fit in there. So it might only be 160 characters if you happen to be using Japanese. Okay. Lots more coming. Contact information, I mentioned there was something important here. Well, first of all, the product page. The forms product page is my responsibility. Yet another one in my list. I do my best to try to keep this page as updated as possible. I think if you look at it now, it even has like, you'll see the open world stuff is on there. I just updated it a couple weeks ago. Okay, take a look at this page frequently if you happen to be a real forms guru and get the latest and greatest. this is where it's important. I am not a social media kind of guy. You probably won't find, you'll find me on Facebook. I have an account, but I don't use it. I do use Twitter though, at least for work. I have made a conscious effort to consciously use Twitter, especially when I do things like this, conferences, Open World especially. I'll be blasting all over that thing. Every time I take a step at Oracle World, I'm going to tell you what's going on. So if you're at those shows, or even if you're not at those shows, but you want to participate from afar, if you want to know what's going on, what the latest and greatest is, that's the way to do it. When we roll out new patches, new documents, updates to the web pages, whatever it is, I'm going to put it on Twitter along with all the other official Oracle places. Okay? And of course, the forums internally and externally and so on. Okay? Thoughts, comments, questions? I know it's late. Everybody's tired and Mike is boring.
So I believe Oracle has committed to enhance this product. So one of my concerns in the industry is, I'm kind of assuring my clients, many times that, tell me whether my statement is correct or wrong. I believe Oracle has committed to this Oracle Forms technology, and you are continuing. As long as the customer pays the support fees, you're going to support them.
As long as we see demand for the product, we are going to continue with it. And right now, I don't see any slowdown in demand for the product. I mean, there's still thousands of users around the world, and until that stops being the case, I am not aware of. I still have a job, so it means we're still supporting it. How's that? How's that for an answer? If my boss calls me now and says I'm fired, then you might want to get worried. So we're in good shape.
Yeah, that's right.
Like I said, worst case scenario, when we roll out version 12, there'll be 5 years of Premier support and 3 years of extended, which takes you to 2023. I am already, we haven't even released 12, I am already working with development on what we're doing next for features. So if that's any indication of to what our plan is, and it's just a plan. I mean, it could change at any time. We could make a decision to roll out version 12 tomorrow.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We had another question here, Beck.
Go ahead.
Yes, it's a question about the future of Oracle reports.
Reports, and I mentioned this earlier at the beginning, there is a statement of direction that was published. I am not really responsible for reports, but I will say this. Just like it says in the statement of direction, we will have a version 12. It will be released as a, I'm going to call it maintenance release, meaning there are very minimal new features in it. The only new features you'll probably find in it are those that were required by us in compliance with the actual Fusion middleware team who puts requirements on us that says if you want to be in the version 12 stack, you must do this, this, and this. Beyond that, I don't know. The recommendation is to start thinking about BI Publisher. I didn't mention it here, but we are looking at that as well. We are looking at doing native integration to BI Publisher, so if you have a thought that you want to go to BI Publisher, we're looking at creating an integration point inside of Forms for that. We're also looking at changing licensing. I know that licensing for BI Publisher cost is very high. We're coincidentally, just last week, I was on an important call just about that topic, looking at what we could do to change that and make it a little easier for you guys. So we hear you and we're working on that.
Thank you.
May I ask, are you planning to do something to create applications which are using on mobile devices?
I'm sorry, what about mobile
Some
devices?
custom for mobile devices.
Yeah, we really don't have a lot in the sense of mobile devices, and I hope I mentioned it earlier, made the comment earlier. The thing to remember with Forms is we're purposely designing desktop applications, even though they run web deployed. So the concept of mobile is kind of out of context.
Yeah, I understand, but like now we are moving towards like everything mobile, that's why I'm asking.
Right, so if there's a need for mobile, and I know I'm running really long here, I'll try to keep it short. So if there's really a need for mobile, and you've got 20 years invested in business logic that's written into your application, the thing to really do is consider one of two things. One, consider how you could get that business logic out of the form and into the database, right? That's something that Martin could talk to you about, or Tom from the Kumaran side, or we've got, again, a lot of partners that are good with that stuff. Alternatively, there's some third-party stuff. I say third-party, I mean alternative stuff, like AuraPlayer, which will allow you to expose your Forms application as a web service, and then you could build mobile against it. My big thing is, I don't want you to throw away your Forms investment and start all over simply because, well, I have a mobile problem, I have to have a mobile device. That's not a good reason to throw away 20 years worth of investment. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, at least not to me. There are several ways in which you could solve the mobile dilemma without starting from scratch, and that's what I'm kind of encouraging everybody to do. Slow down, think about it for just a minute, because the cost of starting from scratch is very costly. Far more costly than adding some new code to your forms application, or removing code from your forms application, whatever the case is. Okay?
Do you have time for
Good.
last one?
What's that, I'm sorry?
Last one.
Sure.
How is Form doing in the market compared to Apex and ADF?
Well, let me start by saying Forms is not ADF, ADF is not Apex. They're completely different products. They have completely different, I'm going to say, interest groups. They solve completely different problems. So to compare them probably isn't fair. But I will say this. Forms, because of the newer technologies, is not likely to see a large influx of new customers, new users, but I will tell you that a large percentage of our existing and previous, I shouldn't say previous customers, but the existing customer base remains. We still have, what I said earlier, several thousand customers still using Forms. Now, those are the ones we could account for. We have many people, organizations that are not actually customers anymore because they're running old versions. Who's running version 4? Who's running version 6? They're not even paying customers anymore. So we can't even account for them in the market. It's really difficult to do. If we could get them to upgrade, if all of those version 6 users were now using version 11, all of the statistical information I have will change because the number of licensing I'd be selling and support contracts would go through the roof. That would change the future of this product, because then I could go to my boss and say, well, I've got 30,000 customers now using version 11. I want to put new features in this product, and that'll be my justification. The problem is I don't. The problem is I have a lot of customers, users running versions 10 and older who are not on the radar anymore. So when I go to my boss, I have no numbers to bring them. The only numbers I could bring them is everybody using version 11, which is probably, if I had to guess, maybe 50%. 40, 50, 60%, it still leaves out a lot. It leaves out thousands of organizations that are still using Forms that are not being accounted for. So that helps in my argument for getting new features and improvements or whatever it is that you guys want to see the product do. Okay. Questions, comments, thoughts? If anyone has questions after this, don't hesitate to stop me, call me, email me. Get me on Twitter, I don't care, forums, whatever you want to do, just please. I don't want anyone to go away with questions unanswered.
Thank you, Michael, and I hope that this has been very informative to the audience this evening. Just one last note I'd like to mention, and I'll make this as an offer to the group. And again, I don't know how many of you are actually have direct experience with Oracle Forms, but as an organization, Kumaran has, as I mentioned earlier, expertise in the area of Oracle Forms. And for those individuals or companies that are interested, we're offering a free POC for one Oracle Form. So if you have an Oracle Form in your organization that you would like to have either migrated, massaged, reviewed, what have you, Kumaran is offering a free POC. So if there's any interest in that offering, I think most of you have my information. It's tom.patak, P-A-T-A-K, at kumaran.com. Feel free to contact me. Thanks very much for everybody's time.
Thanks, everyone.